The show 50 Against 1 kicked off, and the host, Tyler Cross, didn't waste a moment. He theatrically turned to the audience, raised his hand to draw attention, and gestured toward the first hater, a young blogger with a bright green mohawk and tattoos, looking like he'd just stepped off a punk concert stage. The guy grabbed the microphone and, with a smug smile, asked, "Clint, it's not the 1970s anymore. Don't you think your fame is just a dusty museum exhibit in Hollywood?" The studio fell silent, the only sound a faint hum from the spotlights. Cameras zoomed in on Clint, capturing every twitch of his face. An operator in the corner nervously adjusted his headset, while the director in the control room muttered into the radio, "Oh, this is gonna be hot." The audience held its breath, waiting for a response. Clint slowly tilted his head, his eyes narrowing, but his voice remained calm, like a desert before a storm. "Museum exhibit?" he repeated, letting the words hang in the air. "Maybe so, but you know what they do with museum exhibits? They preserve them because they're unique. They tell a story. My films aren't just old reels. They make people think, feel, remember what it means to be human. And what'll you leave behind, kid? A Kishasnyolchvan Karakteris tweet?" The audience erupted in laughter and applause. The blogger flushed, his smug grin fading, and he quickly sat down. Tyler, sensing the moment slipping away, laughed, but his laugh sounded strained. "Wow, Clint's not messing around," he said, trying to regain control. But a spark of unease flashed in his eyes. Eastwood wasn't someone you could easily throw off balance. Tyler quickly pointed to the next hater, a middle-aged journalist with sharp features and a piercing voice. She stood, adjusting her glasses, her tone dripping with disdain. "Seriously, Clint, you talked to a chair on national television, at the Republican convention in front of millions. Do you really think that was the peak of your political career? Or was it just the moment everyone realized you'd lost touch with reality?" Laughter rippled through the audience, but this time it was sharper, almost mocking. Cameras swirled, capturing Clint's reaction as his eyes briefly flashed with anger before he regained control. Backstage, his team stirred nervously. They'd specifically asked to avoid political topics, but Tyler was clearly ignoring all agreements. One of the producers muttered into the radio, "This is off script." Tyler's gone too far. Clint leaned forward, his gaze piercing the journalist like a bullet. "The chair?" he said, his voice low but clear, laced with a hint of irony. "That was a metaphor, in case you didn't catch it. I wasn't talking to a chair, I was talking to an idea. The emptiness I saw in politics." And you know what? People still quote that moment. They laughed, argued, thought about it. Your articles? They're forgotten a week later when the next issue hits the stands. If you want to talk about reality, start with the fact that you write for clicks, not truth. The audience exploded with applause, someone even shouting, "Get her, Clint!" The journalist, clearly not expecting such a comeback, sat down, her face red with anger. Tyler let out a nervous laugh, trying to diffuse the tension. "Hot, hot, but this is just the beginning," he exclaimed, though his voice trembled with unease. The director in the control room muttered, "This could get out of hand." Tyler, sensing the show teetering on the edge of chaos, quickly pointed to the next hater, a young activist with neck tattoos and a smug smirk. "Clint," he began, his voice thick with contempt, "do you really think people still want to hear your opinions? You can't even clearly say who you voted for in the last election. Why do you think your views still matter to anyone?" The audience split. Some booed, others clapped. Cameras swirled, capturing Clint's tense expression. His team backstage exchanged worried glances. Another political jab, another breach of agreements. Clint's eyes narrowed, but his voice remained steady, though edged with sharpness. "My opinions?" he said. "I say what I think, not what the crowd wants to hear. I don't dance to anyone's tune, and I don't need Twitter likes to know who I am. As for voting, that's between me and the ballot box. You should try voting yourself instead of yelling about it online." The audience erupted again. This time the applause was louder, though mixed with murmurs of discontent. Tyler, sensing the show gaining momentum, raised his hand. Great, but we've got a special guest who wants to ask some really tough questions," he declared, his smile turning almost predatory. Out stepped Richard Vance, a notorious tabloid columnist whose hatred for Clint was legendary in gossip circles. His name sent a ripple of whispers through the audience, and Clint's team backstage bristled, as if bracing for a storm. Vance wasn't just a hater. His articles had spent years dragging Clint's personal life through the mud, digging up painful details and twisting them for headlines. He grabbed the microphone, his eyes gleaming with anticipation of a takedown. "Clint," he began, his voice slow and venomous, as if savoring every word. "Have you ever been honest with your kids? Or did they learn about you, your affairs, your scandals, your mistakes, through TMZ headlines like the rest of us? Tell me, what's it like to be a father known from tabloids instead of family dinners?" The studio fell deathly silent. Even the spotlights seemed to hum more quietly. Cameras zoomed in on Clint, catching every movement of his face. His jaw clenched, his eyes blazed with a fury not seen before. An operator in the corner nervously adjusted his camera, while the director in the control room muttered into the radio, "Oh hell, this is bad. Keep the close-up." Clint slowly rose from his chair, his tall silhouette looming over the stage like a shadow from his old westerns. "You want to talk about my family?" he said, his voice quiet but carrying a threat like the click of a gun's hammer. "My kids know who I am. They know me from the life we've lived together, not from your filthy articles. And you? You hide behind your laptop, spinning lies because that's all you're good for. Why don't you say it to my face without a mic, without cameras, like a man?" The audience gasped. Vance, clearly not expecting such a response, faltered for a moment, his confidence shaken. But he quickly recovered, his lips curling into a sneer as he leaned closer to the microphone. "Oh, Clint, you can play the tough guy, but we all know the truth. You're a relic who thinks he can still set the rules. Your kids might know you, but do they want to know the man who left a trail of broken hearts across Hollywood? Or do you think your films make you untouchable?" The tension in the studio became unbearable. The audience froze, cameras hummed, capturing every moment. Tyler, instead of intervening, leaned back in his chair, his eyes gleaming with delight. The show's ratings were surely skyrocketing. Clint stood, his gaze like a blow, but he was still holding back, his hands gripping the chair's armrests. In the control room, panic was mounting. One producer muttered, "If he snaps, it's either a masterpiece or a disaster." "Hot, hot," Tyler exclaimed, spreading his arms. "Richard, got anything else to say?" In the control room, a producer muttered into the radio, "This will either save the show or destroy it. Keep the cameras on, Clint." Richard Vance, the scandalous columnist with a smug smile, had no intention of backing down. His eyes gleamed with the anticipation of a triumph, as if he could already see the headlines of his next articles. He slowly raised the microphone, his voice sharp and full of disdain. "Oh, Clint, you can play the hero, but let's talk about Gran Torino. You played a racist in that film, and honestly, it looked pretty natural. I'm guessing that was just a reflection of the old Clint, right? Just an angry old man who can't accept the modern world?" Vance's words hit like a slap. The audience gasped. Some shouted in outrage, others laughed nervously, but the laughter quickly faded. Cameras swirled, capturing the shocked faces of the guests and Clint's tense expression. His team backstage froze. This wasn't just a breach of the agreement to avoid personal attacks. It was a direct assault on Eastwood's legacy. An operator in the corner nervously adjusted his camera, and the director in the control room shouted, "Close up on Clint, don't miss this." Clint took a step forward, his presence even more imposing. His eyes narrowed, and his voice, when he spoke, was low and sharp, like the sound of a revolver's hammer. "You're calling me a racist?" he said, each word falling like a stone. Gran Torino is a story about redemption, about a man who learns to see the world differently, who sacrifices himself for others. But you didn't get that because you're not looking for truth. You're looking for headlines. You take art and twist it to fit your lies. If you want to talk about the old world, look at yourself. You're stuck in a world where gossip matters more than truth. The audience erupted in applause, someone shouting, "Get him, Clint!" Vance, clearly not expecting such a response, lost his composure for a moment. His smile wavered, but he quickly regained it, raising the microphone closer. "Oh, you're good at talking pretty," he shot back, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "But let's be real. Your films are just fantasies of an old man who thinks he can solve everything with fists or a revolver. You play heroes, but in real life, you're just an old guy who can't let go of the past. Am I right?" The tension in the studio became unbearable. Tyler, instead of stepping in, leaned back in his chair, his eyes gleaming with satisfaction. The show's ratings were undoubtedly soaring. But in the control room, panic was rising. "He's gone too far," a producer muttered. "If Clint snaps, this is going to be a disaster." Vance, sensing he had the upper hand, decided to deliver the final blow. He stood, his posture aggressive, his voice growing even more venomous. "One last question, Clint," he said, his eyes blazing with malice. "How many women did you have to leave? How many hearts did you break to finally make a film about responsibility? Your affairs, your scandals, they're no secret. Were you filming Bridges of Madison County to justify yourself to everyone you left behind?" The studio froze. Even the spotlight seemed to hum more softly. Cameras locked onto Clint, whose eyes burned with a fury that could no longer be contained. The audience sat in stunned silence, only a few whispering in disbelief. Tyler, who had been reveling in the chaos, now looked shaken. He clearly hadn't expected Vance to go this far. The director in the control room shouted into the radio, "Keep both angles! This is going viral!" Clint slowly rose from his chair, his tall silhouette looming over the stage like a scene from one of his own films. His face was stone, but his eyes blazed with righteous anger. He took a step toward Vance, who instinctively stepped back, his confidence melting under that gaze. "You dare talk about my life?" Clint thundered, his voice filling the studio like a gunshot. "You who makes a living off lies and gossip? You stand there, hiding behind a microphone, and dare judge me for my mistakes? I've lived a life you'll never understand. I've made mistakes, sure, but I've owned them. I've made films that made people think, cry, change. And what have you done besides spreading dirt? You're what's wrong with this world, Vance. You haters feed off hate because you can't create anything real." But Clint didn't stop there. He turned to the audience, his voice growing louder but calmer, filled with the strength that comes from experience. "All of you here," he said, sweeping his hand across the room, "think you can tear a man down by throwing dirt at him? You're wrong. I'm not perfect, but I'm real. I've told stories about people, their struggles, their victories, their failures, and I did it not for fame but to leave something behind. What will you leave? Tweets? Articles forgotten in a day? You attack me for my years, my views, my life, but I'll still be standing 100 years from now because I created art, and all you create is noise." The audience erupted in applause. People leapt to their feet, clapping, some shouting, "Clint, you're the king." Even some of the haters who had been booing earlier sat in stunned silence, moved by the power of his words. Vance stood clutching the microphone, his face pale, his smug smile gone. Tyler tried to say something, but his voice was drowned out by the roar of applause. Clint turned to him, his gaze like a blow. "This is your show, Tyler? You let this trash insult people who've built something? I came here to talk about veterans, their sacrifices, and you turned it into a circus. I'm done." Clint dropped the microphone, its thud echoing like a gunshot. He turned and walked off the stage, his steps resounding in the silence that followed his words. The audience erupted again, some shouting, "Legend!" Tyler scrambled to salvage the situation, laughing into the microphone. "Wow, that was epic. We'll be back after the break." But it was clear the show would never be the same. As Clint left the stage, the studio still buzzed with emotion. Cameras darted between the shocked faces of the audience and a pale Vance, who tried to speak but was drowned out by the noise. In the control room, producers argued. One shouted that it was a goldmine for ratings, another muttered that we've lost control. But the real explosion happened outside the studio. Social media blew up before the episode even ended. Hashtags #ZerTeamClint and Vance Exposed trended on X, with users sharing clips of Clint's speech. "He took down that hater like in Dirty Harry," one fan wrote. Another added, "Clint Eastwood at 95 destroyed an entire show." Legend. The video of his speech went viral, racking up millions of views in hours. Fans shared quotes. "I created art, and you create noise," became a rallying cry, echoed from Los Angeles to New York. Meanwhile, Richard Vance's reputation crumbled. His articles, once attention-grabbing with scandalous headlines, were now mocked as tabloid trash. Ex-users dug up old tweets where Vance bragged about taking down stars and trolled him mercilessly. One viral post read, "Vance thought he could take Clint Eastwood. Now he's looking for a new job." Several outlets that regularly published his columns announced they would review their collaboration amid the public backlash. The show 50 Against 1 also took a hit. Though the episode's ratings were record-breaking, many viewers accused Tyler Cross of letting Vance cross a line. A post on X with 500,000 likes read, "Tyler Cross set up a circus, but Clint Eastwood showed who's boss." The show's ratings dropped in the following weeks as viewers boycotted it, calling it toxic. Tyler issued an apology, but it felt forced and did little to salvage his reputation. In contrast, Clint Eastwood emerged triumphant. His documentary project about veterans gained massive attention, with donations to the related charity doubling within a week. Memes flooded X, showing Clint as Dirty Harry aiming at Vance, and fans called his speech Oscar-worthy. In interviews after the show, Clint remained reserved, saying, "I said what I thought. Life taught me not to stay silent." His walk-off became a symbol of dignity and strength. At 95, Clint Eastwood proved his legacy wasn't a museum exhibit, but a living legend that continued to inspire. The audience, initially there for a circus, left with respect for a man who didn't just endure, but prevailed.